So, like I said, my name is Suze Shardlow. I'm one of the co-organisers here at Ladies of Code London. This is the fifth in our Get Into series where we're demystifying roles in the tech industry. We've got a special guest for you tonight. Before I introduce her, normally if I was doing an in-person meetup, I would go through where the toilets and the fire escapes are for your health and safety, but hopefully you know where they are in your own house. So unfortunately, I can't help you with that. We are looking to feature more tech roles. So we've already looked at gaming and AI, web development, testing and engineering management. Tonight is getting to product management. If you would like to come on and be interviewed or give a talk about your role to demystify it for other folks and hopefully get them into your discipline as well, that would be fab. Get in touch with me or Sarah through the meetup group. Or if you know somebody that might like to, please let them know about it and ask them to contact us. So without further ado then, I would like to introduce tonight's guest. Melanie McKay is Head of Consumer Products at Rightmove. She started in product when she finished university and has been at Rightmove for almost 3 years. Before that, she worked at Transport for London. Melanie joins us tonight to give us some insights into how to get into product management and what it's really like. Now, I'm really glad that Melanie agreed to come and speak to us. There are lots of disciplines in tech that people are curious about, and product management is definitely one of them. Melanie has performed all sorts of product roles in the last 15 years, and now she leads product at the UK's largest real estate and property website. So she's really well placed to demystify this area for us. Welcome, Melanie.
Thanks for the intro.
Oh, no worries. Thanks for joining us. I know it's a big chunk out of your evening, so we really appreciate it. So we just want to set the scene to begin with, some nice easy questions. So you're currently working at Rightmove. Can you tell us briefly about what your team's responsible for? Like, we'll go into various aspects later and how the COVID situation might have affected you, but how would you sum it up?
So I am Head of Consumer Product. So consumers for us are people who use our platform, our public-facing platform, customers being our estate agents or new homes developers or commercial agents, people like that. So I look after our consumer-facing website, so desktop and mobile site, and our apps. I say I look after them. I'm responsible for them as a whole, and then I have a set of teams that I work with that build then actually what we're actually developing, I guess. So anything that, if you go to Rightmove, anything that you see, we look after.
Yeah, okay, so you've got a consumer website, you've got a consumer app, and then there's other bits that your teams personally don't look after. So presumably you've got a portal for like estate agents, maybe an app for them.
Yep, so we have a portal for estate agents where they can load their properties, and then we have data feeds where they can just hook into the back end and basically pass their properties up, rather than having to log in and manually load them. You imagine estate agents have got hundreds of properties, so you don't manually load them all, so they can send them over that way.
Yeah, and presumably you've got product teams that are responsible for those products.
Yeah, exactly.
And you also sell a lot of data, don't you? So to help surveyors and people like that who monitor house prices and
exactly
make those decisions about what the value of property is right now. So are they also considered products within Rightmove? Do they also have that same level of
yes and no. I suppose it's interesting. Different companies term product in different ways and term their approach to product in different ways, which makes it slightly more complicated. But the teams that look after consumer and customer facing products and then revenue generating products we place on top of those are set up in a similar way to the way that I work. So that's with the head of product that works with product owners with teams, and then we have our data services team that build, like you say, the feeds for different customers that we work with in terms of surveyors or banks, and they're set up, I suppose, slightly differently, but you could consider them to be a product development team that has a product owner and a business analyst that work with them, but it's a slightly different approach to the way that they work.
Cool. Okay. So techie question then, what tech stack are you using at Rightmove?
So the main bulk is, we're a Java house. So we're back end is Java. Front end, we're having an interesting kind of move, so maybe working in Node. And back end, I guess, so not just front end. But so there's a kind of Node conversation going on of, is this where we want to go? But the majority of it's built in React. The teams have a fair amount of autonomy in terms of what they want to go after. I mean, saying we're a Java house, so there's a limit, but we do have some teams that don't use React and don't use Node. They'll use Knockout, actually, which we're probably moving away from. But so there's a bit of a mixture, but predominantly a Java house. We're moving from like most people, moving from a legacy code base across to microservices systematically. So we're getting off of a nice little nice giant monolith into microservices at the moment as well.
Yeah, I'm just trying to remember when I first learned about Rightmove, because the first time I ever looked for a house was about 20 years ago, but I don't know if it was on Rightmove. How long has Rightmove been around?
20 years.
Right, okay, so it was Rightmove then.
It might have been, yeah. It could have been.
Right, yes, I can imagine the legacy code there's a bit of a spaghetti junction.
There's a few. I mean, the consumer-facing site's not made of 20-year-old code anymore, but there are a few bits of 20-year-old code knocking around, actually. But yeah, we're
cool. No, I think that's good. I think that's good for people to know, like, if they are maybe working as software engineers at the moment, they wanted to get into product. I think it's just interesting for them to know what tech stack different places are using. So it's a question I do like to ask. So you, like I said earlier, you've been in product management for 15 years now, and product hasn't always looked the same, has it? Are there different flavours of product management, do you think?
Yeah, many. One of the biggest challenges, actually, I think with product is exactly that, which is just from just between companies, different companies I've worked for, where you've gone in and saying, okay, I'm a product owner, and that means X where I worked previously, and then you go in and turns out it means something slightly different in the next company. The overall view of product management as a whole doesn't change in terms of what you're there to do, but how you apply what you're doing changes hugely, and has massively changed over the last 15 years for sure.
Yeah, definitely, and different companies as well. So you've worked in the public sector and now the private sector, and yeah. I guess the TfL's a massive company as well, and you've got all different types of people using those products, haven't you? So
yeah, so TfL is a really interesting one because it's such a large organisation. Actually, I worked in TfL Online, which is the website that people would use, and also we had the open data policy, so we provide all of our data out to people, and we looked after that space. But actually, we had for people who aren't familiar with TfL, sorry, but we had a Oyster site, which is like card that you can tap to use the underground if you're not in London. But that was a totally separate team, which is a really interesting challenge because you've got, as a consumer, you're using both of them and you don't care that there are different teams building them, but totally different teams and totally different ways of managing what they were doing. So it makes it an interesting challenge. Even just working, you meet someone who's got the same job title as you in the same organisation, and they do it very differently. That can always be a bit confusing.
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of us have had that, haven't we? Where it feels like we were talking about this earlier, where it feels like you're working for two different organisations almost. But yeah, so thinking about product management, I know you said there are different flavours, but generally speaking, what experience does somebody need to get their first product manager role?
So with the caveat of the different kind of flavours and what could be a product manager, could be a product owner, anything like that, I think the experience tends to be really about taking a problem and trying to solve it, which is why I think actually it's quite applicable to lots of different places and you can move into it, because it's really about understanding what you're trying to achieve and then really being able to apply common sense and logic so this is how we could then break that down into a set of steps to achieve something. So in terms of experience, I think anything where you're able to be involved, and depending on your role, obviously the viability of this is different, but where you're able to be involved with really understanding the why are we doing something that we're doing, and then being able to say this is the reason and therefore this is what our approach could be. So I think it's about, in terms of experience, breaking something down, and where you can, getting into those conversations, even if you don't get to be the product person in that conversation, really being involved helps you kind of move into that space.
Yeah, okay. So with that in mind, I'm sure one of the questions that a lot of people are asking is, how much coding knowledge does a product manager need? Because it's obviously a technology role, isn't it?
It is. It's interesting. I've worked with people in product who have been engineers and have moved across. I've worked with people who've had absolutely no coding experience whatsoever, and almost have no interest in it from a coding perspective. They don't care, because really it's about what the end result is, and each is faced with different problems. Because what I found a lot is if you're an engineer that moves into product, your temptation to tell people how to do it, or just do it in some cases, which is always a problem, is a challenge. You've got to hold yourself back, and you can't just go, this is the solution, especially if you're sat with another team of engineers and you're like, oh, I know how to do this, or what do you mean it takes 2 weeks, I could do it in a day, or even, look, I did it, which is a challenge. So you've got to be able to kind of check yourself from that perspective. And I've definitely worked with someone who first became a product owner. He did exactly that. He just built it himself, and did not go down very well with the team. The opposite is that if you don't understand at all, and you're not from a technical background at all, your challenge is then just that you have to be able to think about how to ask the right questions so that you can understand. Because you're not checking someone's code, but you need to understand if someone says it's going to take 2 weeks, and not just why, but what do you need to do? What are the complexities there? Oh, okay, so that needs to work with that. You don't have to be able to do it yourself, but you need to be able to follow the conversation, I guess I would say.
Yeah, I guess it's very much like a trust and verify role, isn't it? And also understanding which bits of that are actually going to take the longest, because could we do them later and get these other bits done that are sort of more importance, or are going to have more impact, or just going to benefit the customers more now?
Yeah.
I guess. So I've noticed that you've used the term product owner a lot while we've been talking so far. Do you tend to use the terms product owner and product manager interchangeably, or what would you say these are?
No, I have quite a strong view about what I would determine to be a product manager and a product owner, and it's born out of the fact that I think they are used interchangeably, and that can lead to confusion. I think I would term the product owner role to be the person that's working within an engineering team, so in a dev team, whatever the makeup of that is, and is working together to understand what the overall scope of the product is and the problems that you're trying to solve, and is working towards an end goal. A product manager may just be looking at the overall strategy, but not specifically the delivery. And that's the way I term those terms, but it's not how other people do. So definitely you'll see roles where it says product owner, where you're not working with a team, or you'll see product manager when you are definitely working with a team, it's definitely one of the things that makes it quite challenging. You've got to look at, particularly if you're looking at, say, job roles, is look at the detail of what actually is being done in that role, and don't just assume it means the same thing to different companies.
Yeah, thanks for explaining that. And I definitely saw a few light bulbs go on and people when you were talking just then. And we had a similar conversation in the last interview we did with an software engineering manager. And yeah, she said the same thing. You need to look at the job advert and don't take it just on the title. And it does seem a bit strange that some people do use them interchangeably, because owner and manager are quite different.
Yeah, one of the interesting things actually was internally, someone who doesn't work at Rightmove anymore, but actually we had the opposite view as well, and it actually took us a little while to realize we were talking at opposites. So you can imagine the conversation of, well, we need a product owner to do this, and I'm going, why? No, you don't. And they're not understanding the kind of confusion that we've got between ourselves. So it doesn't help, and it's kind of, for clarity, it's worth looking at the detail or questioning what it is. And you also have things like people talk about tactical product owners versus strategic product owners, people who are more in the hands-on, further out. And again, it can depend on the size of the company, the language they've chosen. It makes it more difficult.
Yeah, and the good thing about tech is that it's not regulated as such, but the bad thing about tech is it's not regulated, so there is no standardization. And I know there are a few organizations that have tried to put standardization in, and it doesn't always quite hit the mark. And I guess because companies have already evolved, like you say, Rightmove has been around for 2 decades already, they've already kind of got those entrenched ways of doing things and the way they call things and stuff like that. So I guess it's very difficult to bring in sort of a standard nomenclature of roles.
It's also interesting because I think as companies expand, they struggle to know what to call a role that's slightly more senior than the last role. So I found I've started to notice now you've got in kind of heads of product, director of product, vice presidents of product, like you're starting to get like loads of roles, and you're like, what is that the same level here as it is here? And it never is. So you can be a head of product in one place that's a product owner in another. And that, again, it's very true. But I think it comes a lot down to kind of expansion and then going, well, we need another layer here, but what do we call it? Because we've already called them whatever. So yeah, I mean, I know that's not a nice, happy answer, but it's a thing to watch out for in terms of roles.
No, but I think what we're trying to get here is a proper dose of realism. And I think if people take away one thing from this conversation, it's that they want to enroll in product management. There are loads of different roles and they're all called product manager. So that's good in a way, but just make sure you read the job description and so you actually know what they're expecting you to do, because it can vary with the size of the organisation too, I guess.
Yeah.
So if you were looking for your first product manager role, is there some sort of portfolio that's useful to have? And if so, what would you say would be useful to have in that portfolio that you can show folks what you can do?
It's interesting because I think it's an annoying answer, but I think it probably depends a bit where you've come from in terms of what your route is going to be. But I think the biggest thing is in whatever you've done, being able to show that at least you understand that what you did, you were trying to achieve this, and you did that by doing this. So, you know, I achieved a 10% increase in click-throughs of something by doing this. So even if you weren't the one that set the strategy, you still understand that what you did worked towards that. So I think that's the best way to show it. In terms of a kind of portfolio, I've never been in a situation where I've kind of wheeled out, these are the specific things I've done, you know, like a design portfolio type thing. But it will be, I worked at this company and I impacted this KPI with this action, essentially. So I think if you can show what you've done in terms of made change, and if you're right at the beginning and you don't have even that to be able to talk about kind of you haven't made a change yet, I think it's again about going back to showing your understanding. So I was part of these conversations that were about setting this strategy. I think it would be, I couldn't say, I'm not sure if I could say right you're beginning your first ever job quite how you'd step into it. I can't quite I think you probably have to start at, it would be about showing that you understand what the role is, I think.
Yeah. Do you get a lot of people that have come in that haven't got any experience with apps or websites or anything? So I guess if you've worked around tech and you've been on a project team, maybe as a project manager, and you want to go into product, that might be a way to show that what you did contributed to the success of the program. Exactly. Or the marketing person, for example. But if you haven't worked around websites and stuff like that, is there any other, like, could you, for example, come in from food if you've worked, you know, non-digital products?
Oh, I mean, I think you could. I don't think I ever have seen anyone see it. I mean, I might have done. I've seen a few, but I don't think I have seen anyone who's come in from somewhere that's completely just have no experience whatsoever. No, that's not true. Sorry, I completely correct myself. I worked with somebody in a previous company who worked in our, it was a marketing, what was actually doing? They use, and this is maybe not the best example because they used the software that they were applying to be a product owner for. So they knew it inside out. So when she came for the interview, she was able to say, I know the product really well, and here are some of the problems that I've faced. And actually, I've done enough research to be able to say to you, here are some of the ways I'd solved that problem. So I guess if someone came to me for a job now that had no experience in digital, and I was thinking, why would I interview you? I'd want them to show me that they'd at least looked at my product and had a view of it. And actually, to be honest, that's true of anybody. If I interview somebody and I ask them a question, just a basic question about the website, and they don't seem to have looked at it, it worries me quite a lot. But you can do a lot by kind of applying and saying, you know, this is what my view might be. So I guess in that case, if you're brand new and you think about portfolios, kind of, I guess I'm amending my previous answer, but I suppose you could put something together to say, I've looked at these platforms and this is something I would learn about that. Any publicly available data, anything that gives you an insight that you can then say, I haven't done it, but if I did have access to this based on what I can see, this is where I might take it.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So last question for this section then. What are some commonly held beliefs about product management that aren't true?
I think the one I've had most often in jobs that I've started is, I remember starting at one job and everyone kind of went, yes, that means we're gonna have a roadmap. so you're going to write the roadmap now. And that was kind of what they thought I was there to do, was just take a list of projects and put them into a roadmap. Almost like you're there to just prioritize a list of wants. And I think that's quite a commonly held belief often. I don't think people always necessarily, when they go, oh, we should be product led, know exactly what they mean by that. So I think the kind of view that you're just there to prioritize a list of things, but also I think that a roadmap is a silver bullet is definitely a commonly held belief. Like, as if once you present something to say we're here and we're going to get here and this is how we're going to do that, that's it. All bets are off. We're fine. We don't need to worry about revisiting it or looking at anything else. So that's a definite one. When you say commonly held beliefs, do you mean within product management or people thinking about product management, or both?
I think both. I think anyone who you know, when you say product manager to them, because I know when I was in marketing, I had the same thing. You know, people thought that you could polish the proverbial. Not necessarily the case. So I guess, you know, when you say product management to people, what are some of the things that they think of that are totally off the mark?
I guess for people who don't work in tech at all, they all assume that what I do is that I actually build whatever it is I'm doing, and I have to quite often say, no, I don't do that at all, actually, which is weird to anyone that then realises that actually what I do is sit there and say, we should probably do this, or what about that? And I guess there's often a view that so I see product as being quite an impartial role. Like, your role is there, in my opinion, product is there to be the balance of all the different disciplines that are around you. And there's a huge amount of imposter syndrome because actually you're not an expert in anything. Your expertise is balancing everybody else out. But I think often each discipline you work with thinks you favour the other or you're there to represent the other. So you often get kind of lumped into being in the development team. So you're a developer, or you're at odds with UX or anything like that, and you constantly have to kind of go, no, my role is to take all of their expertise and balance those, not to have the expertise myself. And I suppose the other one that I talk about a lot is, I think when people work in product, they often forget that they can't term themselves to be a user of their own product anymore. So you will often get people saying things like, well, when I look for a property, this is what I do, but you're already tainted by working on the product. No one else looks at your product as much as you do. So when you go, when I'm looking for a house, this is how I look at it. It's like, yeah, but no one else does. No one else knows that button's at the bottom of the page because no one's ever scrolled down there, or whatever else it is. And again, it's one of these things you have to check yourself in product, is not to just kind of lump everybody into what your view is. You have to be able to step back and go, okay, well, tell me what, either if you have a UX team that you can talk to you about users, or if you have to do the research yourself, whatever it is, but not to just kind of basically build what your perfect, in my case, property search website would be. It needs to be what works for everybody.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense, and I can so relate to that because I'm dyed-in-the-wool marketer. That's what I did before I went into tech, and product is one of the 4 Ps of marketing. So it's one of the pillars, and a lot of people that I've worked with that have worked for me, when they produce something, it's like, well, it makes sense to me. I'm like, yeah, but you're not your target audience, and like, audience is key here. So totally understand what you're saying there. I think there's quite a lot of similarities actually. But for now, what we're going to do, we're going to do our first speed round. So this is our hashtag and our Twitter handle. So if anyone wanted to tweet at us, I'd be really grateful. So don't worry about this. Just say the first thing that comes into your mind. It's supposed to be fun.
Okay.
Everyone's had fun so far, so don't worry about it. But just the first thing that comes into your mind, or what your immediate preference would be. So cats or dogs?
Cats.
Country you'd love to visit?
Sri Lanka.
All mod cons or fixer upper?
All mod cons.
You don't fancy a project then?
You're tired.
Okay. Favourite meetup?
Oh, apart from this one? Yeah, I was going to say, that's a trick question. There is a women in product group that I think is good.
Cool. Okay. Yeah, we might link to that. If you've got a link, we can put that on our Twitter thread later on. Cool. Yeah. Early bird or night owl?
Night owl.
Terraced or detached?
Detached.
Marmite, love or hate?
Love.
Favourite app?
For Strava.
Yeah, okay, I can go with that. They have taken off quite a lot of features this week.
I already have a premium membership, so I don't feel the loss of the.
Oh, yeah, you're all right then. Yeah, I'm not, unfortunately. Silicon Valley or Silicon Roundabout?
Roundabout.
Apple or Blackberry?
Apple.
Blackberry or Raspberry Pi?
Raspberry Pi.
City or suburbia?
Oh, I can never decide. Suburbia today.
Okay. It does change throughout your life, I think.
No,
Some points in your life you really want to be in the city, other points you just want to go retire to a village or something. Loft extension or basement extension?
Loft.
Probably easier. You don't have to pin the house to prevent it falling into the ground. Kindle or physical book?
Physical book.
Favourite meal to cook at home?
Pastina.
What is that?
It's like a soup. I'm going to not do it justice, but I had it when I was in the mountains in Italy during a roast. But it's basically like a chicken broth with very small pasta in it. That's what I've been making, but it's very tasty.
Oh wow, yeah, that does sound tasty. I need to go Google that. Good tip. Thanks for that. And as you're a product manager, a product you wish existed?
Oh God.
You must have thought about this at some point.
I have. Well, this is going to. The thing is, the thing I really want to have is too much Rightmove related. But I want to be able to take a picture of a house and see how much it costs.
Yeah. I mean, we've all been there. We've all been to these fantastic neighbourhoods, haven't we? And thought, oh yeah, I wonder how much that is.
Yeah, that's a bit Rightmove focused, but yeah, that's my. You said the first thing that comes to my mind, so yeah.
I remember a game I used to play when I used to work in an office and just walk around at lunchtime and guess how much the house is, but then add on 100 grand because it was probably that. And then you get onto Rightmove and realise it was actually more like 500 grand more than you'd added the 100 grand onto. So, yeah. It's
not good at guessing.
It's quite depressing, isn't it? So, yeah, cool. So, going back to then what it's like to be a product manager, what kind of things do product managers find themselves Googling to do their jobs?
The two things I think come up, three things I guess come up the most often. One is the best way to represent a roadmap, because that's an ongoing conversation of what's the best way to get across to people what it is and what version of the roadmap is there. And there are lots of different people have different views. One is how to assign value, I guess, how to determine the value of a proposition. So an ongoing debate. Working with UX is another thing that people Google a lot in terms of what's the best way to work with UX team. There's lots of crossovers between the two, which can be challenging and good in other ways. And there was one other one and it's completely gone out of my head. No, it'll come back to me in about 20 seconds. But.
Okay, no worries. So you mentioned a few other different roles there that you might work with. So as a product manager, who are your main relationships with?
UX, a lot. Engineering. And then engineering in that case, I'm kind of counting our actual engineers, so back end, front end, QA, our ops engineers and our architects. So it's kind of as an overarching space. And then stakeholders across the company. So they can be, they could be anybody, depending on either from a product specifically, you'll have stakeholders who have a vested interest in what it is you do. See, with my job in Rightmove, that's most people at the company. But then per initiative that you're working on, there'll be people who are more interested in that than others, so you'll highlight them. So most people within a business you'll be working with at some point when you work in product, you're going to interact with everybody.
Cool. And so you work for the consumer side. So how do you get the data that you need to inform your product decisions, and what sort of data do you take into account?
So we use a lot of tracking that's on the site in general. So we'll look at Google Analytics and see how people are interacting with the site. And then we'll look at actual data in our database in terms of like leads that are sent to estate agents, things like that. We will look at, like I said, messages that are sent to estate agents, how much time people are spending to look at Rightmove, how much we have adverts on the site, so how many adverts people have seen and impressions of the ads, including kind of where they are in people's viewports. So have they actually seen them, or have they just loaded on the page? And it will depend. It depends a bit on the product. So we've got kind of what I kind of started to call health metrics rather than talk about KPIs specifically, because they're like those ongoing metrics you should be looking at that inform the health of the product. So we've defined those, and that's a regular kind of check. And then again, if we're doing a specific piece of work, there should be data involved in why we're doing it in the first place. So we're either trying to achieve a goal, or we've seen a drop in something somewhere. And with that in mind, then we'll be tracking that specific data. So if we were tracking, say, the number of messages sent to estate agents, because that's an easy one. Say we went, oh, it's dropped. That would be something that we would be measuring while we're working on an initiative. So yeah, GA is kind of a big part of what the Google Analytics is a big part of what we look at.
Cool. Okay, so we talked a bit about who the main relationships are with, and also that you're dealing with a lot of legacy code and things like that, like a lot of people are. And the fact that you don't necessarily have to be a coder, but you have to have some appreciation for what the coders are doing and why they're doing it and how long it's taking and all of that good stuff. So with all of that in mind, how do you balance between tackling technical debt and new features on your product roadmap?
Yeah, that's always an interesting one. I think it depends slightly on what what the goals are. So to give a bit of context, the teams at Rightmove are split up around themes. So we've looked at the overall user experience journey, and then we've broken it down into pieces. So a team looks after the kind of initial coming onto Rightmove, then a team looks after searching. So we've done it in that way, as opposed to kind of you look after these pages. So it's split by experience. It means because people do use the whole platform, it means you're not kind of going 5 different teams have to work on everything that touches all through the site. It's kind of you can do it several ways, but we do it in that way. So what we've then got is we need to re-platform, get off our legacy code base, but there has to be a reason. It can't just be, well, we don't like it anymore. It's hard to, I mean, it's hard to work in, because if something's going to take twice as long to do in an old code base, then you don't necessarily want to do it. But it's usually again, it comes back to the value. So could we make this change in the old legacy code and still achieve what we need to achieve and not shoot ourselves in the foot in the long run? Then maybe we would do that. If there's value in replatforming it, then that's usually beyond just the replatform. I don't think I've worked on anything so far, at least where we are, where we've just replatformed for the sake of replatforming. Because if it's a part of the site that's not being used very much, there's little value in replatforming it and doing anything with it. But it usually ties into, if we want to achieve this goal in the long run, once we replatform, we can move faster. But it comes back to the overall goals we're trying to achieve. So we have OKRs that we're working towards. And one of our OKRs is actually about how quickly we can ship our products. So how quickly we can move, which means we can't constantly be working on legacy code. So it's weaved into our overall objectives as a business, which makes it slightly easier than when you're in a situation where it's just, well, we've got this whole big pile of bugs and we're not doing anything about it. But I think when you're a product manager, product owner, whichever job title you've got, the value of your product should include things like the technical debt and the ability to work quickly as a team and the ability to test and learn. And if you can't do that in your code base, then actually you should be looking at replatforming it, because it's going to add value to your product in the long run. So it's about thinking about the bigger picture, I think.
Cool. Okay. So you talked a little bit about the speed at which you would ship things. And obviously COVID-19 has affected probably every company in the world. How has it affected the speed at which you've had to ship things to kind of cater to this new, mostly remote consumer? Because you haven't had the luxury of thinking, right, in 6 months' time, we want to introduce this new product so we can do things like remote viewings. You would have had to bring quite a lot of things forward. So how has it affected your role?
It's been very busy. I've actually taken them off the wall, and they're now in front of me instead of behind me, but my wall is actually covered in whiteboard paper, which is full of different ideas and rejections. But we basically had to move quicker. So cancel anything that didn't need to be done, any kind of meetings that would be useful to have but could wait. So clear out calendars as much as possible, understand as quickly as possible what the problems were that people were facing right now, bearing in mind it was moving, and then say, okay, what can we do? What's the minimum we can do to make a difference, and keep working like that. So we use Confluence, so I just set up a COVID-19 response page basically and dumped all the ideas that we had, split it out. Could we reject them easily or not? So there are a few where we straight away went, it's too complicated, it's not going to make a big enough difference. It was a bit of kind of based on our experience and our knowledge, not going to make a difference, to get to a short list. And then pulled out, okay, spoke to some of our customers, to our consumers, what difference will it make to you? Great, this is the right direction, and just constantly checking. But we had to move fast. So we've had to shift things around, which means plans we had shifted back. Or where we've had to build new solutions that work for COVID, we're then having to go, well, now that we've started going down this path, but we were already going this direction, how do we get back? Have we just managed to make ourselves even further away than originally? So we're having to now kind of go, how do we knit this back into being the right thing in the long run? Or was it just something we just did for this and now we'll get rid of it? So we're making those decisions as well.
Yeah, and we don't know how long this is going to go on for, I guess. So this actually could be a long-term solution, which we don't know at the moment. I guess somebody in Rightmove, not necessarily in product, but somebody has got to keep an eye on the legislation, because, you know, rules are changing all the time as to how much people can go and mix with each other and get out of the house and things like that. So that whole market is going to slowly change over the next few months, and maybe go forward and maybe take some steps back as well. So
it was really interesting because the government announcement that the housing market was open again, was made the day before it was going to be reopened, and no one was told. So it was just announced. So lots of estate agents were thrown by that. Most companies were just like, well, what? And people who are, you know, vendors selling their properties are like, wait, so I can sell my house now? Can I have people in, but I'm not allowed anyone in my house? What does that mean? And huge amounts of questions. And because of the presence of Rightmove, that lots of these questions are directed at us. And, you know, so, okay, what does this mean for me? Or a vendor might go to their estate agent and say, so you're selling my house, but I don't know what this means. And the estate agent's going, well, we just found out about it too, Rightmove, do you know? And we're all kind of learning together. Like you say, it's moving very quickly. So we're doing everything we can to keep on top of it and to make sure we're doing the right things, but it's fast moving.
Yeah, and I think you've just touched on something really interesting there, because Rightmove is definitely a trusted brand in the UK. You're the UK's biggest property and real estate website. So I guess if anyone wants to know, like how do I sell my house? You'll probably go on Rightmove and see if there's a guide on it. Yeah. So, you know, can I sell my house? You probably go on Rightmove and just, you know, is there anything for sale in the local area, and how long's it been up? You know, has anyone put it up in the last week? So can I take a sort of a view from that? So yeah, that is.
We have a lot of users that or visitors to the site who do look at that kind of. They're not there specifically, definitely to look at properties right now. That could be their secondary action. It could be that they're looking at what's on the market or anything like that. And yeah, we do find people kind of look to us. We started doing some consumer facing webinars, which we'd never done before, but just to help answer people's questions. So our marketing team set up a whole set of webinars, got some experts in, and we had a whole host of people going, I'm trying to buy houses, trying to buy a house, just one. Trying to buy a house, what do I do? And because there's no one to point that question at. So we had a lot of success with those, and actually it's been really interesting to have those conversations with people.
Yeah, I guess that is interesting, isn't it? Not everyone's coming to buy. Some of them are just coming to browse. The same way that you walk past an estate agent window, you're not necessarily looking to buy right now, are you? So cool. Okay, so with that then, we're going to go on to our second speed round. So anyone who didn't tweet last time, feel free to do that. You know, it's not too late. Again, just whatever comes into your mind first. No stress, no pressure. Mac or PC?
Mac.
Favourite country you've been to so far?
Cambodia.
Town or village?
Village.
Mouse or trackpad?
Mouse.
Burrito or pizza?
Pizza.
Cupcake or donut?
Cupcake.
Kit Kat or Oreo?
Kit Kat.
Favourite website?
Rightmove.
Second favourite website?
Oh God, I spend most of my time on running websites.
That's
So
cool.
yeah, I spend, yeah, I don't know. What do I spend? Oh, running websites and the news, actually. So The Guardian. God, that's sad.
Nice. Yeah, good choice. Marathon or half marathon?
Oh, a marathon.
Brilliant. You have to give me some tips. I was going to try and get up to half marathon, but then the virus came. So yeah, I'll definitely want to learn some things from you. Marathon or Snickers?
Snickers.
Best book you've read recently?
I'm just reading a book called
Fragility.
Yeah, I can't say the word, sorry, Fragility, which is really interesting and eye-opening, so I think I'd say that one, actually.
Yeah, actually, I'm thinking of reading that as well. I've seen a lot of people recommend it this week, so definitely be interested in hearing your views on that and what you learn as well. Music while working, yes or no? As in, do you like listening to music while you're working?
No.
Okay. Favourite meal to take away?
Pizza.
Yeah, nice, good choice. Bit of an Italian vibe going here with the food. Best advice you've been given?
Worry less.
That is good advice. If you can worry less.
I kind of feel like whenever someone says that to me, I want to say that would be great if I knew how to. But yes, that's generally the best advice I'm given.
Yeah, if you can worry less, worry less. Probably the trick is to think about how to worry less when you're not worried.
I agree.
Not when you're worried. So yes, okay, cool. Thanks for that. So back then onto the last segment, we're just going to talk a bit more about product management and where you think it's going and stuff like that. So you've worked in product management for 15 years. How has it changed over that time with the move from desktop to different types of mobile device? Because your first products were websites, weren't they?
Yeah.
How's it changed in that time?
I mean, definitely the use. Every company I've worked for, the use has been more. Oh, apart from one, maybe the use has shifted across to be much more mobile focused, which has meant having a better understanding of mobile use, mobile devices. How do people interact with them? Should we have an app? Should we have a mobile site? So there's that's an ongoing kind of debate actually in a lot of companies. Do you need an app? Everyone kind of built them originally and then went, do we need an app? Is that necessary? Do we need to be on someone's phone all the time? Do we not? So I guess there's been that shift. And I think for me, the shift it has been pushing more to being, I kind of mentioned this to you earlier on, but being more focused on what the problems are than just there to deliver what somebody else is looking for. And that means understanding your users and the devices they're on more and their behaviour on those. I think maybe in the past it was a bit less kind of problem and why and more kind of, not quite project management, but I think it was more aligned to kind of how to deliver something as opposed to working out what should be delivered.
Yeah, and maybe more about content management, because if it was a website, thinking about what people need to know rather than what they need to do, because websites couldn't really do an awful lot back in the day.
All those kind of interactions and tools. Yeah, exactly. So the first company I worked for was called Hotels R Us. It doesn't even exist anymore, I don't think, but it's not called that anymore. But it was like you'd search for hotels that you could stay in, but you'd do a search, you'd see the hotel, you could send a message, you go back. There was nothing other than that. It was a very basic website. No kind of, the amount of functionality you can have now is much more vast, which is where UX has come in much more heavily. I'm working more with UX from that perspective.
Definitely, yeah. There's a lot more psychology involved, and it's like you said earlier, it's the why, isn't it? Why do people do that, and why did they go from there to there, and how do we kind of use that sort of intel, I guess. So we talked about how to get into product management and things like that, how to get your first job and what to demonstrate to get that interview. So once you've got the job, what sort of training and development do product managers need?
I think this is such an annoying answer because I think I keep saying this, but it's a bit individual. But I think I don't think there's a specific course that people should go on or should do, which will be unpopular with some people, I guess. But there are lots of different product management type courses that you can go on. There's product owner ones, which are useful from an understanding how Scrum works and being a product owner in a Scrum team. But I think actually it's constant reading and constantly keeping up with what's happening. So subscribing to various blogs, looking at different going to different meetups, looking at different groups, and seeing how things are evolving and how different companies are working, following people who maybe you'd see as experts in that area and learning from them and reading what they're talking about. So I think it's a constant thing. I have a list of kind of books and blogs that we use internally that we just constantly look at, and if anyone reads anything they think is useful, they add it to that. So anyone that joins a company, we're like, here's a bunch of things you could read, you should probably read, that are useful. But I think it's constant kind of training and development of yourself. Sometimes you find people, when they start, if they haven't come from a technical background, do you want to understand the technical side slightly more, so they might do kind of basic bits of coding. But I don't necessarily think it, like I said before, I don't think it's necessary. I think it just might make you feel slightly more comfortable in that space. So yeah, I don't think there's not like a specific course that I would say everyone should do this. More that you should consider reading around as much as possible, but I'd advocate for that in any situation, actually.
Yeah, it comes back to what we were saying earlier about how tech isn't regulated, which is good and bad. So there isn't a standardized thing. So there's a lot of opportunity there for you to demonstrate that you do have the skills that are needed if you don't have the exact experience. But if you did think of any of those things on the reading list off the top of your head later, if you could let me know, we'd be quite happy to tweet them out for anybody.
I'll ping you a list. You won't be able to tweet it, it's too long, but I'll send you a list over and you can do it. Like.
Yeah, I'd be quite interested, because I did quite a lot of research for this interview, but there's just so much out there and everybody's got a different opinion, as we've kind of already touched on. So it would be nice to just see what other people think. Yeah. So with that then, what sort of tooling do product managers use?
I feel like I keep answering the same thing, because it depends on the person or the company. But again, different companies use different things. But a very basic Excel spreadsheet is definitely going to be a starting point. Not because you need some kind of Gantt chart, but because it's quite nice. I like boxes. I like order and boxes. So I can just say, I'm here, I'm going here, these are steps I'm going to take to get there. Fits out quite nice in something like that. But we use Confluence and we use Jira. And we do a lot in terms of creating decks on like Keynote or PowerPoint, not because we're doing presentations, but because, again, it's a nice way to block out the information. I think the main kind of thing are things like, that's like software related, I guess, but things like product canvases or, again, different companies call them different things. We call them one pages internally, but where you're thinking about what's your motivation for doing something, what are the problems that you're trying to solve, what's the success of this going to be, what are the risks you have in this project. So kind of a canvas that can be made of a few different questions. We try to use those as much as possible, to partly for consistency. So if a designer's working with a few different teams, they're not having to relearn someone else's approach, but also because it means you answer those questions up front. So yeah, there's probably more and I'm not thinking of them.
Okay, so you mentioned a few different tools there, and obviously, most of us have had to start working from home or working at home recently. So that's affected people in different ways, and different jobs are easier to do at home than others. So how easy is product management to do remotely? Are there some things that suffer from not being face-to-face?
It's not impossible. I was a bit nervous when this first started. When we were first told you're probably going to start working from home, a few of us we were sent home to do like a business continuity, is everything okay? And a few of us said, right, we'll just spend the afternoon trying out different things. So let's try, what if we were going to do a whiteboarding session? How might we do that? What if we need to do a workshop with 15 people in it? How are we going to make sure everyone can talk? So we tried out a few different things to make sure we were kind of prepared. Some of those things we've carried on with, some have just gone back to, I'm going to take a picture of the piece of paper I'm drawing on in front of me. So it is actually fine, I think. You just have to be willing to have a lot of conversations with people. It takes longer, basically, because, just like in any call, you can't quite tell when someone's finished talking, and can you interact with each other properly. So things take longer. It's not impossible. I'm very visual, so again, because you can't see it, but I draw constantly when people are talking. So I've used up about 5 notepads just drawing out what people are saying and then holding them up to the screen and being like, is this what we're thinking? And that's fine to do. I think it would be a real struggle if some people were in the office. I wouldn't be able to do it. I would struggle to be here and have a team of 6 people in a room together when I'm trying to facilitate a workshop or get through something. I think that would be a challenge, not impossible, but I think if I was in that situation, I'd almost want them all to log on to their laptops, even if they're all in the same room. So while everyone's at home, not been too hard. But if it was more mixed, I think I'd find it more difficult.
Cool. Okay. Yeah. So I think, a lot of people are either having to find something new now or they're looking for something new to do. And possibly if they're trying to get into product management, wondering how easy it is to do remote. So I think that's really useful to know. And I think that also the global market's opening up a little bit more now because, a lot of people are working from home. Companies are realizing that actually it's not as hard to have people remote as we wanted to think.
Yeah.
Or that we did believe. So hopefully this will open up a few doors for some folks that are watching tonight. So we talked a lot about how to get into product management because obviously that's what we're here for tonight. But in case there's anyone watching who's already in product management or is thinking about maybe not doing it forever, so they think, I'd quite like to try that. I'm in a role that I think I've got the skills that I could demonstrate to go into product management maybe for a little while. Where can you go from product management?
I find that a really difficult question to answer. I've got to admit, having not left it.
Where have some of your staff gone maybe then? Some of the folks in your team must have left and
yeah, I suppose the main route that most people have taken has been actually, interestingly, a couple went into engineering. So they decided actually they wanted to more be doing the actual development work themselves. And there's a big affinity with UX and UX research. So there's kind of been a movement across into actually, I want to understand this more. So one person in particular has gone and done a huge amount from a UX perspective and is now a UX researcher. And I suppose actually if I was probably going to move into anywhere, that would be the thing I would be the most interested in it, or more of a strategy role, so at a business level strategy role. So not specifically working with development in terms of building stuff, but what's our overall business strategy. So I guess you've got kind of different directions depending on your preference from there, I guess. I mean, I went into teaching and then came back after about 2 years, so I don't recommend that.
Yeah, it's definitely not for the faint-hearted, teaching, especially at the moment. I think that's another profession that's had quite a lot of changes foisted upon it. So I guess for the next and final question, the answer is not going to be teaching. What are you excited to learn about or work on next?
I can talk about.
Just, it doesn't necessarily have to be about work. It could be something that you want to learn about that might help you at work.
Yeah, I suppose always more in terms of UX. I think like you said before, the psychology behind why people make the decisions they make, I find fascinating. And I'm particularly interested in how we can make tech more inclusive and more diverse. So trying to understand what we can do in that space, and how to go about doing that. So I've been a STEM ambassador before. I actually need to re-register and do that again. But trying to look at kind of diversity in tech is another area that I'm quite interested in and excited by.
Yeah, and the whole accessibility piece, because accessibility is everybody's job. But I guess that a bit like what you were saying earlier, product managers are going to come and fix all our problems. I'm sure there are some people that think, product managers, they'll deal with the accessibility issues, don't worry. Mm-hmm. And then, the other people in the team, like the engineers, are thinking it's someone else's problem. And then the UXers are thinking, have I got to do everything then? So yeah, that's quite interesting. And I think everybody needs to educate themselves about that so that we can all bring our perspectives to it to just make it better for everybody, I guess. Cool. Okay, well that is the end of the interview. So thanks so much for joining us again, Melanie. I think everybody should have taken away something useful from that. We just covered so many different areas, whether or not you already work in tech or you don't work in tech. I think I saw somebody in the chat there say that they are a teacher and they want to get into product management, which is really cool. And it's just interesting to know who you work with and what the challenges are. And just from a personal point of view, the synergies between what I used to do and product management, there seems to be quite a lot of linkage there. So yeah, thanks again for joining us.
No problem. I was just going to say, if anyone wants to connect on LinkedIn or send me any questions or anything they've got, feel free to message. I might take a while to respond sometimes, but I'm more than happy to pass on anything if I can. So feel free to.
Cool. Thanks for offering that, Melanie. It's really kind of you. So as for Ladies of Code, then our next event is on Thursday, which is Get On With It, our long-running series now we've run. I think this will be our 14th or 15th one on Thursday. So it's if you've got a project that you want to work on, doesn't have to be technical, but if you're struggling with motivation, you just want to get together in a group and just get a bit of cheerleading to do that, feel free to join us on Thursday. We will publicise that in the next day or two. On Sunday, we've got the same thing happening again, Sunday afternoon. And then the next one in this series, so the 6th Get Into, will be Get Into Data Engineering. We're just figuring out a date in the diary for that, but hopefully it'll be in the next 2 or 3 weeks. So keep your eyes peeled for that one. But in the meantime, everybody stay safe and look after yourselves. And thanks again for joining us tonight. Bye.